feel like everybody's right and everybody's wrong.
100%. Why is this important? Why are we even going here? He's helped a lot of guys. He's also not had success with a lot of guys.
Come in with a purpose, and they're very intentional with what they do and how they do it.
From the majors to the sandlot, baseball and softball share space in one place. Welcome to the farm system.
Fellas, and the ladies, welcome back for another episode of The Farm. Ladies, we got special guest today. She's fired up, like she's trying to hold back the smirk. Trying to hold back the smirk. Nikki P is on the pod today. We're going to talk all things softball. What's going on? Why are you so excited about it?
I'm so excited. I don't know. This is cool.
Well,
and I wore the softball shirt today.
Yeah, Tennessee. I see.
Shout out to Karen Weekly and Chris Malvo.
Yep. Also, shout out, just as you got to make a PR statement every time you wear a different thing. Also, shout out to Texas. We would just like to say a shout out to Texas. All right.
Sorry, I wore this shirt.
No. Yeah, I set it up. I knew it. I was like, she's wearing Tennessee. We're definitely doing a pod today. So many things, softball, and so many different directions and rabbit holes. And again, this will be the first of mini podcast. I'm actually kind of blew my mind when we said it, just when Cody was like, well, you going to make your debut today? I was like, okay, she hasn't done a pod yet, huh? So we've talked about it quite a bit. So some things that I wanted to talk through. We actually mentioned this at lunch today. We were talking about how the chants that happen in softball comparatively to baseball, and like the difference between the two, I think is really interesting. And also too, I got some things to say about women's sports in really good ways that men could learn from. So I think we could dive into some of that things. But also with it as well, there's so many different rabbit holes. So I'll open this up. What's going on in softball right now, Nikki P, from your view, from your peer view looking around? What do you think's, like what's new, what's popping, what's in, what's out, what has been top of mind for you just kind of looking around the sport?
This year it's been the glitter eye black.
It has.
It has been the glitter eye black. Yeah. That has been something new. Last year it was the glitter visors.
Wow.
That was a big game changer.
Well, I like the eye black. The eye black, I think it looks pretty cool.
It does look cool.
Mm-hmm.
It does look really cool. But last year, being fortunate to be a part of like the pivotal of softball, I got to see firsthand how much different it was last year compared to the years before, just about the competition that was being played. And, like at Texas last year, we were picked like barely top 20. We went like 0-5 for the first tournament at Clearwater and came out to win second in the country at the end. So, and just like things also like mid-major schools are now coming up against Power 5 schools. So I think softball's in a good place right now where the ceiling's being a lot closer, where I think the competition's getting a lot better because people are taking player development a lot more seriously now. Yeah.
No, and I was going to say the other thing is one major change in the sport in general, I'd say probably over the last like 5 years or so, is the hitting. Like girls there's more, and I statistically probably need to look it up, but like I know that there's more, like the games are more high scoring. It's not so dominated by pitching, even though it's still pretty dominated by pitching. But I guess I could say the same with baseball in that way. But I know that in that way there's a lot more home runs, there's a lot more doubles, there's a lot more, and I think on the same side of that, it's also kind of weeded out, I feel like, the athleticism also, too, just like in the infield and all those things that are happening, too. I think it's weeded out a lot of the, let's say, lower-tier slappers, where, like, the slappers now that are out are pretty good. Mm-hmm. I mean, what do you think on that note? Again, I'm saying, from just my perspective, but what have you seen, kind of over the years, the last couple of years?
I think in the early 2000s, there's been a lot of short game recently, just because the pitching defenses weren't as competitive. So now I think more the power hitting game, hitting balls more gap to gap, has been more of a pivotal role. And so as that has transitioned into softball, I think also defenses have been able to kind of, since softball is so quick, I think it challenges more for the slappers to be able to be more placement-wise. And I think also competition-wise, girls being where they are now, like barreling up more balls, hitting balls more gap to gap. I think so important now, especially for the game of softball. And I think we've been seeing more power hitters lately than ever before.
Yeah, for sure.
But I also think there could be a shift in that as well, since the new rule came out recently with softball about like the out of the box rule
Hmm.
has switched short game up a little bit more behind because a lot of slappers are out of the box when they do hit. But overall, like I think the game's going in a good direction now, where people are starting to realize that you don't have to be the biggest girl to hit gap to gap. You can hit doubles by just being as big as I am. So
Yeah. What do you just to break that down, the rule change there, because that's also very different. If you're listening from a baseball perspective, the out of the box rule is very different from baseball compared to softball. So I know in baseball, for example, any part of your foot is touching the line, you're considered in the box. Now that is not the rule for softball. So I wanted you to kind of like elaborate there on like what the difference is in that rule, what it used to be, what it is now, and then why that's impacted the game.
I think that rule's placed in 2020 or 2021. It hasn't been very long, but before, as long as your foot wasn't completely out of the box or on top of home plate, then
Mhm.
you were good. And now,
Yep.
any part of your foot that's outside of the chalk is considered you being out of the box.
Yeah.
But at the same exact time, with that too, it's very hard for the umpires to see that and
And
like
balls
the
and
ball
strikes.
and
Yeah.
a lot of times, like I think they base their opinion off more like where the foot was being placed or where the
Mhm.
footprint was.
Yeah.
So over time, that's been kind of that was a hard rule at first. Remember, the first year was really tough for a lot of slappers, a lot of them being called the box. And now, like as I keep watching games, it hasn't been as prevalent as it has
Yeah.
been before. I think they've been like a little more leeway about it, and I
Yeah.
have seen more slappers this year than I have the previous years.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think the other thing is like also one thing I noted when I was just, the more softball I've watched over the last couple of years is one of the things I think is a big impact. And I think a lot of hitters in baseball don't really think about this either. But the impact of, our box dimensions are very different than your guys' box dimensions. So that's the other thing as well as like, again, it's more designed. It's like, again, obviously less width. And then also on top of that, they seem to be longer. Right. But maybe it's because the width is so there. And again, I'd have to look up the exact dimensions. But again, it's also designed for, again, there's different rules of play. Like baseball back in the day, we used to really utilize like the full box, right? Like, there'd be guys that are like, more towards like the back corner, obviously the backside of the box is really prevalent and a lot of, see the ball longer, all the things that people like to say that way, or maybe somebody's scooting up towards the pitcher because, he's throwing certain types of breaking balls, not so much in the big leagues, but again, at lower levels, the pitching, the timing, that's one way they can do it. The other thing is usually scooting closer to the home plate so that they can cover more outside pitches and things like that, right? I would say more often than not in baseball, the backside of the box, right, like behind the hitter or going towards the dugout behind them, they usually use the backside or the back corners, a lot less often as well. But I think it's more designed for the game, going along with it. And then also, you talked a lot about it on social media. I know there's a lot of baseball players or people that are also getting into softball. Why don't you explain? It's a common term that used all the time is, when we talk about slappers, we talk about being a triple threat. Like, what does that mean, right? So someone that's interested in softball going into that side, and also too, maybe didn't grow, they have a daughter or an X, Y, and Z, and they're like triple threat. Like, what does that mean? What does that entail? Why is that so important for slappers to have those like dimensions of their game?
Triple threat is defined as someone that can hit for power, for average, and do short game all at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
in one setting, basically. But also, triple threat can vary from person to person. Obviously, with certain girls, some people are a little bit more faster and a little more stronger than others. So, like for me, like triple threat for me would be like I want to hit the ball over the infielder's head. I want to put the ball on the ground. I want to make it hop. I want to make it give with a little, and I want to bunt.
Mm-hmm.
Versus someone else who's maybe a little stronger than I am would be like, okay, I want to hit away from more like gap to gap to the wall. Okay, I can put a ball down when I want to put a ball down. I can chop a ball 10 feet in the air when I want to. So it just varies from person to person. But when you're starting off, learning how to just hit balls flushed is the most important thing. What we do here at the farm, just learning how to be braced at contact. I think is the first foremost part
Mm-hmm.
that you learn that should learn for striking, and obviously learning how to bunt too would be the second part at the same time. learning how to like have touch with your barrel. So
Mhm.
if you're starting off being a triple threat, I would start there. Learning how to hit a ball flushed and learning how to have touch with your barrel would be my most important part.
Yeah, no, I think that's big. And I think too, a lot of people underestimate, um, again, like you're talking about, not only just touch, and then also, you could call it direction of some of those things, but I also call it, you know, not just placement of obviously where the ball is going, because again, supreme slapper. And again, if you're in the sport, and this is, again, I'm more trying to educate people that haven't watched the game at this level. Is one of the things is, again, the placement is huge, and we know that within baseball, within like bunting, placement is gigantic, and it still is obviously from softball in that way when it comes to bunting specifically, but also too when slappers, especially at the elite level, especially at power fives, is you got some elite shortstops that are out there, right? You got your Pages that are running around, you got your Taylor Pleasants that are running around, you got what's her name? I was just watching her play the other day, the shortstop that you sent me. What was her name? That was against that play against LSU.
Chambly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like some elite players that are really just crazy athleticism that's coming into the sport right now as well. I think that's just huge when it comes into putting those balls in plays. But one of the word that comes to my head when I think of a slapper in a lot of those ways and those skills, the word that pops in my head is like finesse. And it's just like there's this finesse, again, touch, whatever those things when you call it, not just with bunting, but also again, like it may be looking like, let's say you're watching like a Sierra Briggs or somebody like that, right? Like you're watching her hit, like the first time you ever watched her hit. I think you need to watch someone like that play a good number of games to realize how elite they actually are. And what I mean by that is it's so intentional where her balls are going. Like it's so intentional. Like it's not like, oh, it just happened to end up there. Like, no. Like she'll put it there 9 times out of 10. Like, it's like she's so elite at those things. And I think that's one thing that gets undermined with slapping is like, again, like how effective it is, especially for a girl that's really like skilled at that. So why don't you kind of just like open that up too? It just being like, obviously, it's a passion of yours, right? Of just like from the slapping side, but like how skill based it actually is. It's not just, I think at a lower level, is it fair to say at a lower level, a lot of times these girls are just really fast and they like a lot of them haven't learned, again, that finesse, that placement, those other things. And then
100%.
as they go up, they have to actually get skilled at where they put the ball and all those things.
100%. Like at lower levels, even like in age groups, like we have a girl here named Lucy Bianchi. Like she's in 12U. She's really, really fast, but she gets away with a lot of things because she's very quick.
So fast, yeah.
And she knows she could put a ball down. May not be like the perfect bunt or like the perfect sauce or the perfect chop slap, but since that age is still growing and developing, and like, their bat to ball skills, like glove skills, like then more errors can be more prevalent. Even so, like in college, you could think about lower level colleges, facing defenses that aren't as skill based or as fine. You can get away with a lot of things
for sure.
But I noticed that my Power Five, like being in that area and like watching so much and training girls who were going like prospects to go to that level, like you can't get away with a whole lot of things. But also too, I'm gonna give you an example. So I used to train Molly Mitchell. She's in Texas. She's committed to Georgia. I trained her from like 12 to like till she was 16 or so. And a lot of her, she was really fast, but she knew that that wasn't going to be enough. And so with her, a lot of my sessions with her, I had her once a week for like over an hour or so. We started figuring out during our time together that it wasn't about like practicing the skills like one by one by one and like getting so many reps in with the tools. It was more about, can I execute the tools within that given time? Like, how can I get my body to figure out, like, immediately changing a tool? How can I get it to actually work? And for her, like, what I noticed a lot with her, we had conversations a lot too together about, she was bad at this one tool. I think it was like bunting. It was a quick bunt. And she used to be terrible at it. And then one day she had it down really well. And I was like, we practice? She goes, no, I just figured out like how to get myself to do that, like that skill without having to practice so much. Just small things. Like, I think slapping too also is going from tool to tool, like within the at bat, like once at a time. And it isn't about practicing the tools like over and over again. It's just about like how quickly can I transition? and
Yeah.
that's the most important part. And the hardest part being a slapper is transitioning from tool to tool.
Yeah. No, and that becomes big too. And again, like if you haven't watched, there's these intricacies within that skill. And what I mean by that is like you're talking about like, those quick bunts are also too the fake bunt, right? Or I don't know exactly that's the exact wording that you'd give with it, but like
Blending.
there's all of these small intricacies, which is like, okay, again, how I'm playing with the defense and getting them to respond that way. But, again, you can connect with this also within baseball where it could be guys that are really fast, even on, when we first, from the other side of that, as just being, it could be a routine ground ball and the guy will beat it out. So we have to play up, right? So that we can, like, hey, this guy's really fast, right? You got to think of like, imagine having somebody more recent too. Imagine having somebody like, Brett Gardner or somebody like that within baseball, right? But at the high school level, he's so elite. Like speed wise, it's like he's put so much pressure on the defense. It's like you bobble, you tap one extra time, any of those things, like that person, they're safe. Right?
Like Corbin Carroll with the Diamondbacks, same thing.
Yeah, just
Crazy.
they're so fast, right? And so, there's obviously a use to that, and there's also different ways of creating hits when you have speed like that. And I think that, again, along with that is that's the same thing in, defensively and softball in that way is like some of these players at the lower levels are like, it could be a routine ground ball. Like she didn't even hit it very well. But she's so fast. And again, the defender is not that athletic, needs an extra pat to get their feet underneath them, has to, all these things to actually be able to throw a ball across the diamond and get this player out. And then you take on top of that as well, like, Lindsay Leftwich just pushed it out pretty hard the other day again. But like the size of the softball, right? Like, and like at what ages those sizes should change. In other parts of the world, it's different. They have smaller balls and they, arrange up. Someone was commenting, I think from like Australia or something like that they had, that the ball like slowly gets bigger and it's like, then different leagues and different ways are going different ways. But, again, why is the size of the softball so important? Well, a lot of these girls don't have big enough hands to actually like palm, right? Like you, she's like to me today, right? That, so what happens is like they can't hold on to the softball, right? And then you have, the science side, you got the centrifugal force, X, Y, and Z, where like the ball like actually is literally will fly out of their hand and they can't control it and they can't throw it accurately. So then a lot of girls, same thing happens in a swing. With hitters is that they'll start pushing to get direction. So they'll start pushing the ball, like shot putting that ball like across, which again, obviously is going to really deplete velo, but it's going to give you some direction and it's something they can do there. So at younger ages too, some of those girls, it's not that they're not strong enough or X, Y, and Z, but they might literally not have the physical size to be able to throw a ball that hard just because when they go to do it, like again, the ball is literally coming out of their hand, right? And a softball's a pretty big dimension. And so I think the other side with that too is like typically, me and Lindsay have talked about this quite a few times is usually the girls that have really good throwing arms, play baseball for a good portion of their life. Not only are you throwing longer distances and those things that are happening too, but like it cleans up the arm path by having a smaller ball to hold on to. And at younger age groups and a lot of different age groups across the nation, like they use a lot of the smaller balls for longer periods of time or whatever that is as well. So I think that's pretty interesting because, in softball, correct me if I'm wrong here, but like in baseball, we play on 60-foot diamonds and then we move up to 90-foot diamonds, right? We got 200-foot fences and then we get to the 300-foot fences. But you guys are playing on the same dimensions. Is it always or is there?
Yeah, it's
okay.
like throughout the whole entire time of your life is
Yeah.
60 feet.
Yeah.
And I think I remember
Are the fences just as far too? Is it still like 200?
It can
feet?
vary from field to field.
Okay.
Some fields are 210 to 210, gap to gap, and some
Got
are
it.
a little wider and a little longer.
Got it.
Typically, if it's a shorter field like a 210 to 210, then the fence will be generally higher.
Got it. So you guys, but again, it's not nothing drastic like us where we go from 60-foot to 90-foot diamonds and then all of a sudden have a fence that's 100 feet further than it used to be. Like that's a pretty dramatic change of the ball. Like, and that,
Yeah, like the 10-year-olds we train, they play the same dimensions as softball.
yeah, exactly. Right. And I, obviously with that, that's something that gets, brought up, something that gets brought up there is like, I think that's a big thing. I actually talked about that, when I was consulting for some teams, the last couple of years, in the softball side. One of the things I brought up, I was like, man, if I coach softball, like I would move my fences back like 40 feet and like we'd be the only ones like hit jacks, right? Like, or like, like again, along with that, it's like, there's so many home runs. there's so many home runs that are now starting to get hit, but also too, the girls are getting stronger, more athletic, like they're training different, like all these other things that are coming into it as well, which it changes that. And I think, I would imagine, but who knows? I would imagine at some point that they probably do, deep in the fields or, those things. Like back in the day, the home run numbers were nowhere near, what's happening now in the game. The sport's just really changing offensively, which is big. And I still think, in some areas, definitely it still has a long ways to go in certain ways. And also too, I think it also makes it difficult as well is when you're playing on a field, and not that it doesn't happen in baseball, it's just harder, is when you're playing on fields that there's not too many happy accidents on baseball fields for home runs, for example, right? Where in softball, like you'll see girls doing half swings. You'll see a lot of these things. And again, not to say that, Barry Bonds pulled one off where his bat broke in half and he hit a home run one time. It was like, okay, again, we're like, okay, everybody in the sport's like, yeah, that's Barry Bonds, right? Like we are looking at that, knowing that, right? But other than that, right, and just in general, right, a lot of these things happen in softball. And also too, like, man, some of these girls these are big girls, like not necessarily too, like, and like powerful athletes, right? Like, when you're standing around, Taylor Pleasance, for example, right? Like that's a very large athletic girl, right? Again, or even to
women, grown women,
grown,
big.
Yeah, like, and they're powerful, right? And you get to that, or you get to what's her name that plays first for LSU,
Georgia Clark.
Yeah, Georgia Clark. Like, she's a beast. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like that girl can create some power. And so, you go with that. It's like, even both of them could get jammed and hit a home run. Like, it's just like, man, that's, again, they're just playing on dimensions that are like that. I think at some point they roll it back a little bit. I don't know if it ever gets to the point that it would ever be like slow pitch softball, like how far those fences are. That's generally like 300 feet or something like that, or some of them are a little shorter. But still, like, with it, I don't think it ever gets that far, but I could see them moving it back, like, I don't know. It'll happen over time because you also have stadiums that are built, and moving back a fence 10 feet is a big deal at a stadium. So, but it's happened in baseball. They change dimensions of fields all the time. Some fields, are unique where, again, and also too, I was going to ask that as well, because I haven't seen a ton of them. Is there unique fields like, let's say you say like the Green Monster, like in MLB, right? Where it's like crazy short, but it's just really tall, right? Or Vanderbilt, right, is very similar to that. Or there's certain, like nooks and crannies, like you look at like Houston or something like that, where there's just like these unique field dimensions. Does that happen a lot in college softball in that way? Or are they pretty routine? I mean, I know you mentioned that there's some fluctuation, but how have you seen a field that's like kind of crazy like that?
Yeah, like at Texas, our wall is one of the biggest walls in college softball.
Yeah,
It was
I remember
huge.
that.
Like, you had to scale that thing, but it was shorter in dimension, like 210 to 210, gap to gap. I don't remember like what down the line would be, and what I think center field was like 220, 225. Generally, the shorter the distance by that length, the taller the fence is going to be.
Yeah.
But not always. Like some schools, like I remember we played at Louisiana Lafayette, or sorry, U of L now, not Lafayette anymore. Their fence was generally the same size as ours, but it was shorter, but it was wood. And there was like nails coming out of it. It was kind of scary to for the play on, but I remember it's just saying things like that. I think the budget and like what the school has resources wise and how they can maintenance their field. It's also important. I think at more Division I, like just more like grass and dirt versus like I know like in D2 and D3, like there's more turf fields.
Yeah. You want to hear a funny junior college story for us? We were playing in a game and the field got like flooded, right? So they like drained it, all the stuff, got it decently playable. But there's one spot in the outfield that was literally just a puddle, like it just a deep, like 6 inches of water, right? So we had to play the game. So they decided at the home plate meeting that they put cones around this area. This is a junior college story to the max. They put cones around this area, and they said if the ball lands here, and everybody agreed on it, right? That we thought the outfielder could have got there to catch it, that it would be an out. And we had a play. We had a play, of course, that went to the triangle of this. And I mean, we're talking about like a 5x5 area. I mean, it was a small, not very large, but still, we were playing with cones on the field. It was pretty classic. So guy hits a ball. Our guy comes running in for it. like catches it, but like right as he's running into the area. And I remember him coming out and like, again, above his cleats was just mud. Just like everything was just his entire cleats down. But I just thought how classic of a junior college. Like that's a junior college story. Like, hey, we're going to play with this massive puddle on the field and we're going to put cones around it. And we're just going to, predict if we thought this guy would have made this out or not. Yeah, some of those fun junior college stories. No, and then the other thing I think is interesting, and this is one thing I've noticed quite a bit too. I know there's two sides, and again, in any sports, and girls can also be mean, right? But I also think that one of the areas that largely I think teams can really pick up from, and men can really pick up from your guys' sport too. And it starts with some of the simple stuff, right? Like, probably the first year in softball. I bet you can probably what's the youngest age of softball like you've seen like a club ball team? Like what age group?
8U.
8U, right? So if you go into an 8U club ball team, like immediately they're chanting, like that there's songs in the dugout, like everybody's singing, like from the ground up. That's how it's built, right? So I just really started thinking about this. Obviously, we just accept it, right? Like everybody knows we're gonna go to a softball game. Okay, there's gonna be chanting all these things. Obviously, in baseball, like you're gonna hear some, home now, come on, kid, blah, blah, but like it's not a chant, right? And so, from your perspective, and I know that this again is so commonly commonly just ran past, but why do you think that is so specific to? Because again, in many other sports that are female sports, there's not chanting like that.
Yeah.
Right. So why do you think specifically in softball? I'm sure there's like a root story, but from your perspective, what do you think? Why do you think that is in that in softball that happens so much?
I mean,
Or
playing
the culture?
softball since I played softball where I'm like 10 to until I was 22. I didn't really play anything else besides volleyball. That was in high school, and obviously like my little short self, that didn't last very long. But anyway, I never really thought anything different of it. I think it was just part of the game. And when I started getting into coaching, I had started getting male friends, and the male friends were previously from baseball. Like either they coached baseball or they played baseball and they were going into softball. And that happens a lot in softball now, a lot of men transitioning to softball. And I would always ask them, like, hey, like, what is the biggest, like, difference that you notice? And it's probably a question they get asked a lot, but, like, I wanted to know, like, in-depth detail, like, not, like, the classic side conversation, like really what's the difference. And the one thing they said that I remember they would always say is the energy of the dugout.
Yeah.
Energy is so much more livelier in softball than it is in baseball.
Yep.
I mean, in baseball you have 9 innings, softballs are 7.
Yep.
It's faster.
Mm-hmm.
Field dimensions shorter. You can have a 7 inning game done in an hour and a half.
Yep.
A 9 inning game in baseball is like typically 3 hours.
Yeah.
So
like 2.5 hours. Yeah. Depending on what level
previously
you're
the
at.
pitch clock. So like I think with the cheering, it makes it more livelier, more upbeat, and faster.
Yeah.
Versus like baseball, there's so much downtime. Maybe there's not.
Yep.
Maybe that's why there's not as much cheering.
Yeah.
Like
well,
softball.
and you're pushing the issue, right? With the 60-foot base is like there's a lot of like bang bang plays.
Yeah.
Where in baseball, when it happens, like the dugout's going nuts, like the bang bang play and this guy dives or whatever, right? That makes it happen. But again, that's very different. I think there's more of a. So in school, not to get us too far off the topic here, we're gonna circle back. But is that in school? One of the classes I took, we talked about competitive balance. It was one thing that was built into a lot of sports, and like these how rules get changed within sports, right? They, for example, like quarterbacks being protected in football, and how these rules have changed over time. A lot of, or 3-point lines or things like that, where they've created these competitive balance situations. And I think if you look at softball, I feel like softball is more, at least today's game, I feel like is more competitively balanced than baseball in a lot of those facets. And what I mean by that is just like how many bang bang plays there are, how much energy, even on a normal, like I've watched, plenty of Power 5 games, but also too, just even at lower levels, like there's just a lot of more energy like within those games. And like you said, the time frame being down as well as, I think that's plays a large factor, like you were saying as well. But like, going back into that, and again, not to get us too far off there, definitely the culture within. But why do you think that like stuck? Like, why do you think like the chanting, all that stuff, it's stuck in that sport, and it's not something that's just gone away? Like it's part of the game now. Like that's just, it is.
Yeah, like I think for me, like also girls tend to feed off of emotions a lot more than boys do, in my opinion. Being around boys here and coaching them, girls, it's a lot of like unspoken language, and I think cheering is like a way to get them to get ready for the game, like understand the situation, but also at the exact same time, like you can't fake emotion.
Yep.
You know, like there's been times where like I remember in dugouts, like whether I was playing or coaching or one of the other coaches would get mad at the players for like not cheering, not saying anything, but
Yeah.
it wasn't really a situation in the time during the game where you could have that immediate emotion to get someone pumped up, like it was almost dead.
Yeah.
So I think cheering is kind of a way to get them to focus or to get them to be spontaneous in that way,
Yeah.
without having to like go around and like baseball, like, oh, you have it, guy, blah blah blah. Like I think girls like use cheering as a way to create energy in the dugout on the field to get someone to produce in that sense. But also I think from cheerleading as well. I mean, the amount of girls that I played with that were cheerleaders and softball players,
Interesting.
it would make sense.
Yeah, I wouldn't put that together. I do think that, because one thing I used to do as a coach is that I would designate a pole in the dugout, and I would say, hey, like nobody can stand past this pole. Then like force everybody together and be like, and rather than everybody like, again, you look at a high school team, right? Let's say your varsity team. A lot of times, a lot of these teams, like you only have, maybe, I don't know, let's say max 20 guys on the team, right? So if there's not only if the guys are out there playing defense, but also too if we're in the dugout and we're hitting, okay, like there's a designated pole. Like if everybody's from this part over, like we're standing shoulder to shoulder, again, kind of build up some of that culture, get guys talking. Again, maybe they overhear a conversation that this guy's talking about, about oh hey, he threw me this and X, Y, and Z, and just kind of forces some of that conversation to happen. So definitely from that side, and that's one of the things that I pointed out too is. Yes, I think this is the hard part though, as well as like literally what you're saying. Men are very emotional too. We just express it in very different ways.
Yes.
And so, like for example, like men wouldn't explain. Like for example, men wouldn't think, "Oh, I'm being emotional" when they're frustrated, but they are. They're being very emotional, right? They're very frustrated, so they're getting short with their words and all these other things, or they're being really quiet. It doesn't mean that you're not having emotion right now, right? Like you're having a massive emotion. You're just how you're expressing it or what you're committing it, in that same way. It's different. But one of the things that I've really admired from softball in that way, it's not just the cheering. And yes, again, of course, along with it, you're going to have the, again, especially on certain teams with bad culture, right? Like they could be really attacking. Those things can happen. That can happen with any team. It doesn't matter, male, female, X, Y, and Z. But, again, yes, let's say that from this way, sometimes gossip could be high, X, Y, these things, right? And that happens, guys happens the other way. There's different ways that it expresses itself too. But one thing that I really admire, about the sport, also in that same way, is that there's also a like unspoken camaraderie when it comes to supporting one another. Well, what I mean by that is that the basement of support is much higher than male sports, in my opinion. Like the basement, and obviously I'm talking in generalities, right? Like that again, on with that, like just in general, if you look at the two sports, like what is accepted in baseball compared to what is accepted in softball. Like for example, if there's one girl not cheering, I'm trying to get half the dugout to get in and locked in, right? And yes, on good teams, culture, guys are into it. When you're playing games that are close games all the time, it's also easy to get everybody tiled in. But if you're getting your butt whooped or you're whooping somebody else, like it's hard to get everybody to stay locked in the whole time, right? And also too, when you got the fans there and all those things at Power Fives and great, awesome, right? That also helps everybody stay into it. And then also to the other team, like, hits a blast or, crushes something, hits a pump somewhere, right? Then it's like, great. All right. Now you have, that brings everybody back into, but along with that is that one thing I think that can, a cultural thing that you guys have is like raising the basement of like support for one another, right? Because yeah, like dude, like that guy just struck out for his second time today and he missed that ball by like a foot or, like just not even close is, and again, like say he comes in the dugout and he slams his helmet, right? And he's like, okay, again, is he not being emotional then? Okay. And when he comes and sits in the dugout and he doesn't talk to anybody, is he not being emotional then? If he comes and again, even all that happens and he comes, stands up there and, doesn't say anything to anybody, is he still not being emotional? When again, on the same side of that is he's still having all of those internal dialogues and those things that he's having and that support and those conversations that could be happening from teammates is just because somebody's not saying something doesn't mean that something's not going on. Right. So I think that that's the other thing as well is like, there is that, camaraderie that I've seen quite a bit. And also too, is I would say from that same thing of culture is girls typically too are much more likely to help somebody else out. And what I mean by that is like, you know, like if I've been hitting with a girl, she's way more likely to go and say, hey, you should go and, you know, you should come with us, or you should, you know, like, again, we should go do it together, or we should do blah, blah, blah.
Motherly instinct. Girls, they like community a lot.
Yeah.
I think me and Brooke talk about this. My roommate, she also used to be a college soccer player,
Mm-hmm.
and me and
Shout out to Brooke.
Yeah, shout out to Brooke. Brookie. Me and her always
Brookie. Sorry, she had me going.
Brookie. We always talk about like how hard it is, like after you're done playing, like the motivation to go like and work out or get a lift in or something, because our whole entire lives we were on teams.
Yeah.
We were with people on teams. Like training, we were training on groups or teams.
Mm-hmm.
And so it feels weird now, like being older, like we do it by ourselves.
Yeah.
Like we're used to community people pushing us. Like I will be, like for me, like I am more excited when I go do something with someone than I am like by myself.
For sure.
I think it's just because being part of like a team atmosphere, like softball my whole entire life, that's what I always had.
Yeah. So you like that this podcast is me and you? I get.
Yeah, like if I did this by myself, I'd be stressing, boy, stressing.
Doing great. You're doing great, Nikki.
But yeah, thank you. But yeah, like the hardest part after playing was like getting used to doing things on your own.
Yeah.
Not having that support anymore.
Huge.
And I think, well, yeah, I coached softball afterwards, but it wasn't the same. Like, it wasn't like I was on the team playing; I was managing. There's a big difference.
And you guys have like a united, a united goal, right? That you guys are working towards things. I mean, again, I would say the same thing with that, right? If you're asking me right now if I wouldn't rather go to the gym and have 10 dudes in there lifting with me, like, absolutely, like, let's go and work. There's a reason that gyms even exist, right? Like,
for sure,
you could even have that too as well. Like, you know, when you create these environments, even like here as well, right? When people are training, of course they want to have like other people. Not only is it going to push you, right? Because I'm telling you right now, I did my lift this morning, and Jarrell will vouch for my rest times in between each set. But again, when the other guy's already started and he's on his next lift, or he's going, again, subconsciously is going to push that as well. And then you got, you know, all the personalities that come within the team, right? You got the guys that are getting fired up, and he's like, I remember some of the guys, it'd be 4 a.m. and that guy's like screaming, ready to rock. And I'm like, all right, man, like, all right, like we're going, right? And then you also have the guys that like wake up kind of halfway through the lift, and then they kind of carry that energy, or they're more infectious like with it. And then you got your guys too that are just quiet and like just getting after it and doing their thing. And you have all these different personalities that are happening at the same time. And also too, like maybe yesterday I wasn't feeling it, but today I am, right? Maybe I'm the energy guy today, and yesterday you were the energy guy that was really getting everybody riled up, right? And some guys, that's just their personality throughout. Like they're typically always like that. And the same thing, like you're talking about, like within teams, and the bus trips and the funny stories of, you know, oh man, we got to be back to the hotel in 10 minutes for, you know, bed check. But, you know, this person, one of my teammates is getting a thing. And then if I leave him, then coach is going to be pissed that I left our teammate out by himself. And like, you know, if we're going to be late, we're going to be late together. And like, you know, like all of these little, you know, things that happen, you know, throughout. So question for you, that just led me to a question, because I've never been on a bus like this. So when you guys are traveling, right? I know in baseball, like someone's about to get juiced up right now. Is we play Mafia. Like that's a massive game for baseball players. Like we play Mafia, right? So it's somebody right now is like, yeah, Mafia, bro, that's my favorite game. But yeah, so we play Mafia. So the whole context of Mafia basically is you have I forgot what they call him. Cody, give me some help. He's probably have his headphones on. But you have I forgot what the main guy's name is, but basically he's like the storyteller, or he's the officiate, the host, whatever the name is. Someone's probably yelling at me right now. Narrator, right? So you have the narrator. So you got the narrator that is, you know, having this, right? And he goes through and he picks the Mafia, right? He picks certain people on the team, right? And usually we have like 20 people, right? And he picks in the Mafia, maybe there's 3 Mafia members, right? And then he goes, you know, picking the cops. So now he goes through and he picks like 3 different cops. And then he picks like 1 medic or 2 medic or doctors, right? And then have everybody close their eyes, all put their head down. And then the narrator's like, hey, like Mafia, open your eyes, right? Then they're like, the mafia opens their eyes, looks up at the narrator, and then they all decide on somebody to kill, right? Maybe one person, two people, X, Y, and Z, right? Okay, boom. So then they're like, cops, open your eyes. So the cops pick somebody that the narrator has to tell them. They pick somebody and go, I think that guy's on the mafia. They don't talk. They just all point, right? They're like, they all like, oh, I think, Cody's in the mafia, right? So then we all point at him, and then the narrator either says yes or no, right? And then the doctor, open your eyes. Then the doctor picks someone to save. Hey, I want to save Nicole, right? So let's say the mafia picked to kill you, but then the doctor picked you to save, right? Then you're not going to die, right? But so then the funny part is we always pick the funny narrator, because the narrator would get up and he'd be like, oh, guys, there was a murder last night. This is what happened. Tragic. It was tragic. There was a freeway accident. And they would come up with this so elaborate story of how this person died or whatever, right? And then just right at the last second, the doctor shows up and saves them. They would come up with these drastic stories that were hilarious. And so, speaking of that, my teammates used to kill me almost always immediately. First person to be out. If I wasn't in the mafia, the last thing would happen was, after it all happens, everybody votes as a group, right? The community, right, votes who they think is mafia, and they vote them out, right? So typically, if they're mafia, they were killing me first, right? And then because I can recruit people and get them on our team, like, yo, I think it's that guy. Meanwhile, I'm on the mafia the whole time. That's the good part. It gets kind of crazy with that. You start playing the other way and be like, man, no, I'm a cop, da-da-da. And then the guy you're talking to is actually a cop, and he knows that you're not a cop, so you got to know how to read people, and all that stuff. And then you're like, I thought I could trust you, man. I thought I could trust you. So we'd play mafia for hours on the bus. What would you guys, first off, would you guys even play games on the bus? What would you guys like to do on the bus? What was kind of your guys' it things that you guys would do when you traveled?
I know, when I played, I think it was Dub Smash. That was the
Dub
thing.
Smash?
I think it was
What's that?
it was kind of like TikTok, but it wasn't. It's basically there's a voiceover in videos.
Okay.
So it was the pre-TikTok to TikTok.
Like Vine almost.
Yeah, it was.
You know what a Vine is?
Vine.
Have you seen
Yeah,
some
I
Vines?
remember
Yeah.
Vine. I'm old
a Vine.
enough for Vine.
Yep.
We make
I made a couple
Vines
classic
lot.
Vines. Taylor back in the day, remember? Yep.
But most of the time on the bus, what I noticed, that was the time for girls to do their hair.
Okay.
It's hair time on the
Interesting.
bus. The braids and the eye black, that's
Makes
the
sense.
hair time. That was
Yeah.
the bonding time.
Yeah.
And then going back on the bus, it would just depend on the mood, whether if you got the crap beat out of you, you
Yep.
probably weren't saying much of anything to anybody. But if you were actually, you had a great a series, then it would
Yep.
be a lot of singing and chanting and cheering on the bus.
That's funny.
I remember
We didn't have that. We didn't.
Yeah.
We had karaoke sometimes, and that was pretty classic. We usually would start the road trip. We had a longer road trip, and the coach would designate somebody, and they would hey, you got 10 minutes, and you're singing, right? I think I was one of the first ones as freshmen or transfers, we all had to sing, and I got some good karaoke in, got the bus going, But yeah, definitely no chanting with it too. What would you guys do on So I mean, I'm thinking both ways, right? Power fives, a lot of times they're flying and stuff. There's there's not as much bus time. I went through the junior college ranks, went NAI, a lot of things. We had some bus trips, right? We had some bus, I had some 14-hour trips. We had some bus trips. So we came up with a lot of things to do. Do you guys, this is very basic in baseball because I'll have all these TikToks that are about this. How was sleeping on the bus? Because we had it it was like a maze. If you needed to get to the bathroom, it was you had to crawling over seats, you're tiptoeing over people. How was your guys' things with the sleeping? How did that go? I don't know if you guys took trips long enough that you guys could take a nap.
We did. We took trips to Oklahoma on the bus, and it was the same, kind of going up and around and over. I don't even
Down,
I would
under,
wait till the
obstacle
next bus stop at a Buc-ee's or something to go to the bathroom. I was
sure.
not about to go to the bathroom in the back of the bus.
Yeah, we used to have that talk when we started the bus trip. I'm listen, all right, there's certain things we can do in this bathroom, and there's certain things we can't. Right, we got a team full of people here. We're gonna be on this bus for 14 hours. We're gonna make stops. You need to wait.
I'm so small, I would just use the whole entire seat to myself and just sleep on my seat.
There you
Someone
go.
bigger than me, they had to use 2 seats with the feet coming off.
Yeah,
that wasn't my problem.
We used to lay across the rows and all the stuff. Yeah, it used to be quite a bit. It was a fun thing. But yeah, no, I think just one that is like camaraderie, and also too just like picking each other up. I think that you guys do just a great job in general. And again, our sport can pick up a lot from that. I don't know necessarily if we need to be chanting in the dugout, even though some of them are pretty hilarious. Speaking of that, what's your favorite chant? What was the favorite one that you learned over the years? I'll put you on the spot. I'm gonna put you on the spot. Give me your
Oh
favorite
my
one.
gosh, it's one of the really dumb cheers, but it's just so funny to me. Oh, she's throwing up. It's like it's so gross, but it's so funny to me. I learned that one last year, but it was hilarious. But yeah, that's my favorite cheer.
That's funny. No, that's why I was when I was at Oregon a couple of weeks ago. I was just listening to some of their chants, and I'm just like, both teams, like, just hilarious with the things they come up with. They were like,
They're creative.
They were playing Stanford, and Stanford was like doing this like really intricate beat, like in the dugout, and I was like, okay, like they had the whole dugout was like getting it in with this, like they were slamming on the pads in front of the dugout. They had like a couple different ones that were hilarious. But no, I think that's again, it's you can't go to a game and like it's just expected. Like I think that's the thing is like everybody knows it, everybody knows that, right? But like it's also too everybody just like run past it. It's like it's so unique to the sport, right? But everybody's just like, yeah, of course, that's how it is. I was like, yeah, but like that's so interesting. Like it's just like why is it in that sport, but like in no other sport? Like they're not doing that in like women's basketball. Like they're not doing that in swimming. Like like I don't know. Like they're not doing that in volleyball, right? Like it's different, right? So I think it's just a unique thing that's kind of in the sport, from that way too. What has been what has been on also from those chants too? What have you been like what? Like the craziest one that you've heard like people come up with?
I can't really think of one at the top of my head, but it's always funny on teams. There's always like the designated 2 or 3 people that make the cheers, and then the rest of us who kind of like go along with the cheers. And we're like, oh yeah, like
okay, this is the cheer. Yeah,
I never made a cheer personally, like but I always went along with the cheers.
You gotta step it up, Nicole.
I know.
I'm gonna make you make.
My time is done.
Yeah, on the next podcast, you're coming with a cheer. All right, everybody's waiting for your cheer that you're coming up with. All right, you make a cheer for this team. We'll cheer with you. But yeah, what was the some of those too. I know that you were talking about one at lunch too.
Oh, it was
like personal ones that they used to make for certain
players.
players.
Like this one, I remember this one was so random during a game. We never even thought about it before, but we had this girl on the team. Her name was Shay O'Leary, and she's a pitcher. And they would say her name like Shay O'Leary. With the claps and everything. It was so interesting to me, and I was like, oh, we never even made that before. And I asked the person who like made the cheers, like, when was that cheer made? And it's like, oh, just now.
Yeah, I just made it up.
So yeah, just kind of going along with the cheers, I think was a big thing for softball. But I also think softball, since it's so open, like outdoors, and the dugouts are like close, and your people are always close. Maybe that's why there's more cheering. Yeah, there's more downtime too compared to basketball or volleyball. Everything's so fast.
Yeah, no, love that. No, and I think that's like you said, it's like it feels, and that's another thing that like feels. They even do that here locally with like the Knights. Is like the downtime is not really downtime. Like they come up with a way to make it very engaging,
for sure.
And I think it's a major way too that like why the sport is so engaging is like even the downtime is not really downtime. Even in stadiums, right? Like they play music when things get slower. They try to cram up with dances, or my favorite is at stadiums. They used to do this at Salt Lake all the time. They would play for the Bees. They would play the Lion King song, and everybody would lift their babies there, right? And so like all the little kids would be in there. That's one of my favorites. Or it's like people's dogs, people's dogs and stuff. Like all those things are filling in those gaps. I mean, obviously you look at the Savannah Bananas. They do crazy stuff in between all their stuff with all their dances. They're huge on social media right now, just absolutely crushing it. No, and I think the main thing with this too is I think on the next pod maybe we'll start going into some details with some stuff too of intricacies and go some layers deeper. But I know that there's a large part of the audience like that listens up. Like, first off, I know a lot of people that have not watched softball in years because they were bored back in the day. Softball is crazy exciting now.
It is.
Right. And again, I wasn't, some of the times they talked about, like, I know some people was like, man, like, it was just a pitcher's duel. It's like 1-0, like, like there's not a lot of action. Girls weren't hitting the ball like that.
Mhm.
Like, if you haven't watched softball in a while like that, like Power 5 softball, and again, with the ratings that are looking at the World Series, I'm pretty sure people are, quite a bit, a few people are tuning in now. But again, if you are listening to this and you haven't, like, you're just like, oh man, I just get stuck in my baseball world. Like, bro, you need to watch some Power 5 softball, and like, it's action packed. Like, especially too, if you need to get into go watch a game, like go physically and watch a game, be in the environments. Especially too, if you can get out to, it's about to happen right now, right? They're about to go into, postseason stuff's coming up pretty quick, right? There's so much, exciting events like that are coming out. Like, definitely, like, get out and watch a game. The sports, just getting faster and more athletic and all those things, and it's becoming pretty exciting. I definitely don't mind. I mean, and also too, I'm just gonna drop this one as well. I've been to a lot of ballparks. Man, if you sit in the parent section, they getting it in over there. Like, I know, first off, the dads are like, okay, like the alcohol at the games, they be getting it in. Like, the dads be getting it in. I'm like, yo, good for y'all. Like, they be having a good old time. They're on vacay. They're doing their things. They're cheering, ranting, raving, all the stuff. And then, again, just I love sitting in that parent section. They are in it to win it. Like that, they are pumped up. Everybody's in their gear. I mean, it's fun. So yeah, if you can definitely get out to some of those games, you definitely should. Side note, like I said, try to sit next to the parent section. It's on a cracking.
It's crazy. I actually got to experience that not too long ago. I went to a UNLV softball game just so I could get some things for my course I'm making for Slapper 2 course.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to
Nice
go
plug.
watch some girls.
Like that was good.
Yeah. Yeah, and I actually sat next to the Cal Berkeley parents, and it's one little pod.
Yeah.
And it was so hilarious to me, like the conversations they would have, like they would sneak their drinks in.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so funny.
It was hilarious. But that was my first time experienced that, because I've always been in the dugout, but I never really got to watch a game like that from outside perspective.
Outside, yeah, no, and also too, I think this year, if I remember correctly, I think this year was the first year that Oregon specifically had drinks at the softball game, and so the dads were like, like they were juiced, so they were definitely getting them. I'm like, I started checking. I was like, dads come and sit next to me and start talking with me about stuff, and I'm like, sixth inning, like they were tuned in. I'm like, all right, y'all come in the but I get it, they're going out. They're going out and they're visiting their little girl, and for a couple days they're doing X, Y, and Z, and I'm like, it's a vacay for a lot of them as well. It's like, who knows, maybe Taylor, one day when your boy pops out when with a girl and she's playing softball, I might have to say, I'm not such a beer drinker, but you never know, maybe pull out a Dr. Pepper, you know what I'm saying, maybe one beer just to say I did it, you know what I'm saying, all the things.
And it's different for the parents then too, compared to before, in high school and before, in high school, when you're done playing, you go back home to your parents.
Yeah.
And in college, when you're done playing, you go to your dorm or to your apartment. Unless you're staying with your parents in school, that's different. But I think at the time, I noticed a lot when parents have their daughters and they go out and play college softball.
Yeah.
The conversations are different, and they're a little more laid back. They actually to enjoy watching the game. Before, I think there's stressful because it was the recruiting time,
all that,
the training time, and now it's a different perspective for them. They get to watch their daughter play her final years of softball ever.
And we're here, it's the whole point. It's like you said, instead of fighting to get somewhere, we're here, so we need to soak it in. Yeah, be in the moment. I was even talking about that just recently. I was talking with that to specifically straight to Paige at Oregon. I was like, hey, you got to remember, it seems crazy, but this is your second year at Oregon, right? You got 2 more, you're halfway through, I gave her this, something I've been using quite a bit. I think I might have mentioned it on another pod, but if not, I gave her this as hey, imagine you're 80 years old. You developed, they got a time machine, boom, you're back in this moment, right? You're standing at shortstop. You're the shortstop for the Oregon Ducks, right? And you're in this moment, and you're just looking around, and all the fans are there and all this, and like you're the starting shortstop, right? And like this moment, like you only got it for a short, brief period in time, you know? And, you know, no matter what happens in the game, no matter what, you know, it's over, like, you know, it's gone, right? It's gone forever. And you can go, but man, like that was my sophomore year and I was blah, blah, blah. And like just sitting there and being in that moment and just being like, wow, like, you know, and we could all use that in our lives too, right? It's like, again, you go back, you know, you're 8 years old and you shoot back to this moment and you're like, oh man, like with perspective, oh yeah, that was when I was, you know, getting my life this way. And I'm like, oh, we hadn't done this with the business yet. Or, oh, that's before we had our third kid, or that's before blah, blah, blah. And, oh, this happened that next year. Oh man, that was the last year with my dad. And like, oh, if I would have just had that one moment back, you know, like all those things, and like just having that perspective. But like you're saying is like, there's so much perspective. There's so much perspective that a lot of the parents have at that moment where like, okay, hey, like we're here. Like this is the level that we're at. And like, it's fully off me really at this point. And like, you know, I want to help and facilitate and do whatever, like, you know, continue to help them. But at the same time, yeah, there's not another level to get to. Like, I mean, obviously they started the professional league and like some of these things that are now happening, but a lot of girls don't want to either not playing in that league, right? And, or, you know, again, they graduated, they're moving on, they're doing other things. And like, you know, that's the level for sure. So much more laid back. Yeah. So I think the last thing, here, Nikki P, I'm gonna give you a break, but next time you're on the podcast, I might make you pray us out too. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
All right. Today I'll take it. But yeah, let's pray us out and then we'll go from there. Cool.
Okay.
Cool. All right. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for just providing for us, God, and just not only just providing in ways that we find as blessing, God, but just in perspective and so many different ways that you continue to mold our hearts and open our minds and just be more in the moment, be where our feet are, God. And we just are so grateful that you continue to use us and work through us, and even through our disobedience, even our setbacks, even when our every moment we fall short, that you continue to love us, God, and just give us more love and understanding and grace and mercy, God. And we're just so thankful that your grace is new every day, and we are just so grateful for you, and we ask that you, for all these things in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right. Well, until next time. Farm System out.